When it comes to the manipulation of metrics, the call is often coming from inside the house. And the problem is often starting at a higher level than who I'm dealing with. I mean, I can't make a client be moral. They're paying me, not vice versa.
Welcome to What Gets Measured, a Ninja Cat podcast about marketing, performance management, metrics, and effectiveness. Because what gets measured gets managed. I'm your host, Jake Sanders. Jason Patterson makes content sing for clients tired of cookie-cutter agencies who just don't care. As the founder of Jewel Content Marketing Agency, Jason works with clients of all sizes to make an impact with their content and deliver the right message to the right audiences. He's worked in a variety of content-specific roles at a bunch of different organizations, including Huawei. And he's here today to talk about content marketing. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jake. I'm very happy to be here.
Oh, man. Me and Jason have been longtime homies on Twitter and LinkedIn. Just a really fantastic, fresh, frank voice about marketing and, you know, what it's supposed to do and what it can do and how we get those things confused. But I'm so glad you're here, man. Thank you for making it work. Let's just jump in and content marketing. It seems like people know the definition, but I want to know what you think of it as, and how do you think people get this definition wrong?
I view content marketing as simply the serving of marketing strategy goals through content. And people get it wrong when content doesn't do this. And there are many reasons why this happens. Often there's simply no marketing strategy in place. I mean, less than half of B2B businesses have a real one. Many are just winging it, while many others think they have a content marketing strategy, but they really don't. They have a slide deck that includes some channels and pillars and some arbitrary targets that were, drawn out of a hat, but they're not really connected to anything remotely strategic. A content marketing strategy is basically a planned customer journey using content. Using content like breadcrumbs for Hansel and Gretel to follow. It is kind of how I think about it. But most of what businesses call content strategy reflects internal concerns. The customer doesn't really figure into it. Maybe content is created ad hoc to fill product launch checklists, which is inside out thinking. Or maybe content is created completely divorced from marketing, since some people who call themselves content marketers think content should exist purely for audience consumption and that marketing shouldn't get involved because it'll just ruin it. And to give you an idea of what I think of that, I call content produced with this mindset Friendzone content. So, in short, I think a lot of what the world calls content marketing is kind of fucked up. And content marketing should serve marketing. And content marketing strategy should serve marketing strategy.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's so sad because I could hear earlier echoes of me in that definition, because I was like, it doesn't matter, man. I'm just making cool stuff to get people involved. And okay, that's nice, but eventually they are going to want to see the receipts. I mean, did you struggle through this, or have you always had this great solid head on your shoulders?
No, I definitely did not. I mean, when content marketing kind of emerged as its own thing, as a distinct concept. At the time I was doing what might be called brand journalism. I was employed by the brand to create journalistic style content for them.
Right.
And this was very much when brands were trying to be publishers.
Yes.
That was kind of the goal. And sure, I mean, I made a lot of great stuff. Some of it was very good and got a lot of views, and I'm proud of it. But there was no marketing accountability for it. All we were expected to really do was, win eyeballs, win followers, subscribers, things like this, but nothing after that. It wasn't our problem. And I mean, if you're a big Fortune 500 company with multiple content teams, maybe you can get away with this. But most organizations don't have those kind of resources. And I genuinely believe that marketing must be at least involved or considered at all times.
Yeah, 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 and that's that strategic underpinning. I love it. It's like you have what you think is a strategy, and it's interesting that look, we have what you said we should need, and you're like, but you need to like participate with it. And I think one of the ways that people are participating with it is the way they report on it. You're talking about eyeballs, you're talking about traffic. If that's the KPI, then I guess then there you go. But I'm curious to what your thoughts are on like what key metrics should be prioritized in content marketing reporting to really kind of outline and detail that business impact.
Well, that's going to depend on your marketing strategy, business needs, and what you need your content to do. For content to provide real business impact, you must figure out where it would provide the most business related bang for your buck, so to speak. For many businesses, the biggest problem is nobody knows who you are. And with businesses that are already famous, they've got a different problem. Winning more eyeballs for their content won't necessarily win them more business at this point. And in these types of cases, many times what is really more useful is to influence the evolutionary path of the industry, including its discourse. So you're talking about a lot of thought leadership stuff. You're talking about, white papers and ebooks. You're trying to control what people are talking about, in your industry, or at least influence it. And those are two very different ball games versus simply trying to get people to know who you are. But it's important to remember that at either of those extremes, you can't just measure what's happening on your brand's own website or social media. And a good content marketing basket of metrics will include at least some from places where your flag isn't planted. For instance, branded search volume is a good proxy for determining whether the world knows who you are. It's a good indicator, especially if your measurement apparatus is not that sophisticated, like, with a lot of smaller B2B businesses. They wouldn't necessarily know how to determine, if how well people
Market,
understand their
yeah,
brand
market
or
share. I
are
mean, yeah,
aware of it.
right, yeah.
So that's a good one. While a more famous brand might also be watching for certain terms, perhaps branded terms, that are being mentioned in the online world more generally. In terms of where your flag is planted, you can't go wrong with having at least a few metrics for each stage of the content marketing funnel. Because if there's a problem, taking measurements at each stage makes it easier to isolate where the problem is. And the funnel I use or recommend has three stages: awareness, consideration, and lead gen. Awareness content discusses the problems and issues prospects face. This is your top of the funnel. Consideration is where you start discussing who you are, what you're selling, and why prospects should buy it,
Hmm.
in your content. And lead gen is just that. It's where you make the ask, for content details.
Yeah.
Now, lead gen is not a true standalone stage because it's paired with either awareness or consideration content, or sometimes both. But I consider lead gen the bottom of the funnel anyway, because after that, it's not really marketing anymore. It's more sales enablement. Because
Mm.
marketing is mostly one way communication, while sales enablement is more like a conversation, a
Mhm.
two-way conversation.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's go back to awareness for a minute.
Mhm.
It's important to realize that there are two audiences you generally want to create awareness with. One is fans and one is customers, and they're often not the same people. Fans are usually people who either work in your industry or at least know a lot about your industry. In other words, they're your peers. And you want them because they spread the word. They talk about your brand, they talk about the people in it, they get you better known. And a good fan metric is subscriptions to either your blog, newsletter, podcast, etc. That's a good way to know whether or not you're really making inroads with them, because customers won't necessarily subscribe to these things, because it means these people have seen your awareness content and they want more. But alone, this isn't enough. Because if you're not making inroads with your customers, awareness content is often what I mentioned before, friend zone content. To make inroads with customers, you need awareness content that addresses customer concerns directly. Such content often doesn't get made because the search volumes for it are often too low, and it doesn't attract as much social media engagement as fan content does, because customers tend to be lurkers instead of open engagers on social media. And what's more, bots can muddy the waters when it comes to measuring the effectiveness of web content. So, a good move is to create some downloadable content assets that address customer concerns. A white paper, an ebook, a buyer's guide, things like this. And then you advertise this content via your outbound channels and you measure the downloads. I generally don't suggest gating this content, since gating can decrease your reach by half or more. And, this is for awareness. But if the expense involved with creating a glossy, expensive white paper means you would simply have to gate it, then I suggest creating something a little cheaper. It might mean taking some of your customer focused blog content, laying out it in a handsome PDF with a few fallouts and graphs, to make it a little more visually attractive. And if the uptake is good, it means you're doing something right. Now, for consideration, a good metric is number of pages per visit. Because with awareness content, it's usually only consumed one piece at a time. I show up, I read one of your blog articles, and then I leave. Maybe I subscribe if I really like it. But if I'm currently considering vendors, maybe I start with a product page, then I read a case study involving that product, and then I might look at your warranty section, etc. And the greater the number of consideration pages prospects look at on average, the more likely it is that in-market prospects like what they see about the product and your company, and the more likely that the company and I are generally doing a good job. Whereas if prospects just show up, look at a single product page, look for a few seconds, and then bounce, not so much. Lead gen is pretty straightforward. You've got lead volume and lead quality. You might track the conversion rate for content generated leads into customers, or you might not, because there are other factors that dictate whether a lead converts besides how they got there.
Mm-hmm.
Another good lead gen metric is leads from the same company. Because let's face it, anyone at any time can fill out a contact form to get up to your white paper.
Right.
But when two or more people from the same company are willing to put themselves on your radar, that's a much stronger sign that they're considering you as a vendor.
Oh, man. It's so cool because it isn't just about the effort, it's about the energy you put towards the structure that people will fall through. Like, please be a brand journalist, please do amazing things, but unless you're setting it up like Jason has just eloquently described, I mean, you've given, I mean, that is brilliant. But it's more about the structure. And I think that's one of the things, the considerations that might fall under, oh, we got somebody who can write, it's like, but write for what? And that metrics thing, the vanity thing, the traffic, the likes, the shares, I mean, how do you kind of disintermediate? I mean, you break it through the funnel and you say what you just said, but I'm just wondering, how do vanity metrics like stop this work? And is there actually a good thing about vanity metrics? I mean, like everyone's like, oh, don't look in the mirror, you're so full of yourself. But how else could you know what you look like? So maybe just kind of dig into vanity metrics real fast.
Well, the term vanity metrics invites its own dismissal.
Right?
It doesn't sound good.
It does not
But,
sound good.
I mean, maybe some vanity metrics don't necessarily, indicate an actionable business response. But that doesn't mean that they're not useful. Like some vanity metrics can be considered indirect indicators of brand health and brand strength. Web traffic, for instance, should generally be growing over time. Sure, Google updates might cause some dips, but the curve should generally be pointing up.
Sure.
It should it should be growing, but it's not dipping, because of those updates. And if it isn't, something's wrong. And
Right.
while web traffic doesn't correlate perfect with revenue, studies have shown that traffic growth does indeed correlate with revenue growth.
Hmm.
Social media followers is another example.
Yeah, oh yeah.
If your brand has no followers on any of the channels you're present on, it means nobody gives a shit about your brand, and that's bad. But there's one thing to keep in mind with these metrics. They're often lagging indicators of brand health or strength, not leading indicators. For instance, if a brand has a lot of social media followers, that's usually a benefit of what they're doing in the real world and not necessarily what they're doing online.
Mm.
Apple, for instance, has 18 million LinkedIn followers, one of the largest, LinkedIn brand followings.
Wow.
And while they do advertise, not once have they posted organic content there, ever.
Mm.
Uh, Other so called vanity metrics are indicators of whether your content or social media people have got game. People
Right.
say likes don't matter, but that's horseshit. If nobody's liking your content, that's bad because it means you're boring people, including your own employees. As to how to use vanity metrics to enhance content marketing strategies, think about it this way. If your vanity metrics are good, it's like having the wind at your back. If
Mhm.
they're healthy, it means you can probably do more things organically and expect to succeed. But if your vanity metrics are not healthy, you're facing an uphill battle,
Right.
and you might need to take more drastic or paid measures.
Yeah, 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 yeah. And I mean, that's one of the big dichotomies that I experienced early in the game is they were failing to break the funnel into it, and they were expecting advertising returns for content marketing efforts. And you're like, well, if you engage with it and create the content that fills those things, and this is awareness, this is consideration, and this is straight for selling. But if you think that one piece is supposed to do all of those, that's when you start getting, you're beating your head against a brick wall. But you said something really interesting about internal teams, and this isn't one of the questions, but how do you get internal teams celebrating that content and sharing that content, or do you see that that's a necessary ingredient? Because that's another source of conflict for content marketers. Is like, we got the blogs, we got all this content. I need our people to share it. Is that a necessity, or how does Jason think about that?
I believe that in most cases it's useful because on many occasions, sales teams overseas and whatnot, they don't know what you have and where. They may not know how to access, whatever content's been made, or maybe they can't access it because, different countries have different permissions
Oh
and
wow, yeah,
whatnot. And
right.
so, like, if I were to assume an internal content, position lead today, one of the things I would do early in my tender is figure out whether or not everyone who needs to have access to content knows where it is and can access it. And if it isn't, I would create some kind of internal system, some kind, I either a system or a calendar so that everyone is updated. They know what content is being made and when it is expected to arrive and where they can find your older content, because I
Mm.
believe that these things are indeed very, very important. And if your content is flowing around and if everyone is aware of it, I think it does indeed create a broader appreciation. So I think this is a very good thing.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. But you mentioned the point, and I think it's this familiarity bias that is unfortunately on all of our heads. You spend all your time thinking about whatever your job is, so you assume that everyone else does. I'm constantly obsessed with Transformers. So when I talk to people, Of course you love Transformers as much as I do. I wouldn't be so sure. But a lot of them just don't know where it is because you haven't said it. Oh, it's on the website. It's on the social. Do you think they follow this? They have their own jobs. But I love the answer is get ahead of it, create a calendar, and share that information. Just share it. So you bring up a good point of how you can translate the content or the efforts or the metrics or the performance of it. How do you take that and turn it into actionable insights for clients?
Most marketing and business leaders have never done content. Therefore, they don't really have the instincts or inclination to read content data, which means you must be as clear as possible when making recommendations. Just tell them what you think should be done in plain English. And if they ask about your data to support, your recommendations, you can get into it. But don't waste time on the data backstory, so to speak, for your recommendations unless they ask for it. More often than not, their eyes are just going to glaze over anyway if you get into it.
Yeah.
However, if you do need to go deeper, demonstrating these metrics in the context of the content marketing funnel is a pretty safe bet. If you can show marketing or business leaders that not enough prospects are entering their funnel, or that the funnel is either jammed or leaking somewhere on the way down, this is a relatively clear and intuitive way to explain it.
Mm-hmm.
And back to what you were saying, but right before this question, I wanted to address one little thing.
Yeah.
Not only do you have to create a system for making sure that people know where the content is and know about when new content is being made,
Right.
you have to repeat it. They need reminders.
Yeah.
And because one of the reasons why things get lost, why people don't know, is turnover. Content people turn over, marketing people turn over, sales people turn over, and then you've always got at least a few people that are in your little content system that are new, that don't know these things, and
Right.
so that they also have to be reminded. So education is a vital part of that, and you can't just do it once. It has to be something that's repeatable.
Yes, yes. And you brought up a good idea. What about repackaging, redistributing? A lot of people will send a blog once, post it once, and then they'll be like, we tried. What's your thoughts on repackaging things? Because I've had great success with taking a blog, turning it into a video, taking one of these podcasts, turning it into, a longer form piece, learning from, case study interviews, and then bubbling that up into, a bigger piece. Like, what's your thought on like repackaging and distribution? And you mentioned like you got to kind of stay on it. Do you think that people are? It's a once. You wrote the blog once. That's it. You had your chance. What do you say to these people?
Well, this is one of the things that AI is really good at and
Sure.
good
Oh, yeah.
for.
Oh, yeah.
This is, I think, in terms of like bang for your buck. In terms of AI's current capabilities.
Mhm.
I think this is one of the big things that you can use it for. The tricky thing with repurposing is that a lot of content gets old pretty quickly,
Why?
especially in B2B. The
Oof.
statistics you reference get old.
Mhm.
Maybe you make some, pop cultural reference or some other kind of reference in your content, and then a year later, you don't want that any.
Yeah,
You
no
don't
one
want that
remembers Hawk Tuah
anywhere
girl.
anymore.
Yeah, you Hawk Tuah? Really?
So it's a matter of repurposing and making sure that it is still current when you do it.
And
So
fresh.
whatever repurposing you do after the initial asset is finished, it has to be prompt. It has to be pretty quick.
Mhm.
Because, like I said, a lot of things about B2B content can get old fast.
Oh my gosh. I mean, in this week alone, I mean, it's like, woo. Yes, great thoughts. Now, a couple more. Speaking about bots, and you lightly referenced this earlier, there's some of those likes might not be coming from real people. Some of that traffic might not be real traffic. What do you think? And you said accountability, which I think is great, but like, how do you ensure the authenticity of engagement with content? And how are you thinking about bots, or what's your thoughts on bots and client online reputation and content marketing?
Well, when it comes to the manipulation of metrics, the call is often coming from inside the house. And the problem is often starting at a higher level than who I'm dealing with. I mean, I can't make a client be moral. They're paying me, not vice versa.
Quote bomb.
And the people I deal with are usually either the head of marketing or the head of digital, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And when I hear them tell me things like, sure, we're a startup producing almost no content, but we must reach 10,000 LinkedIn followers by the end of this year, come hell or high water, even if we have to buy them. Expectations like this usually originate from a level higher than marketing. I can advise the people that I'm dealing with that the money they're spending to inflate their follower count would be better spent elsewhere, but I can't make them do it.
Yeah.
Now, if you want best practices, all companies can really do to try and discourage shenanigans that start at lower levels,
Yeah.
such as, say, a rogue digital marketer, for instance, goosing their KPIs, through some kind of shenanigans. The way to discourage this is to not put the fate of a marketer's career, future, or year-end bonus on a single metric, or even a few online metrics, because almost any single online metric can be manipulated, often by damaging other metrics that may be more important to your brand health or revenue growth. So, performance ratings and what marketers are held accountable for must take a more holistic view, a
Mm.
more comprehensive picture and set of metrics.
Gosh, I love that. I couldn't love that harder. You mentioned AI, which repurposing, great use case for it. So let's get into AI a little bit. It's here. Everyone's using it. And I think it kind of aligns with what you were just saying. It's like the thoughts of this technology and the hope for what they'll get, the return comes from higher levels. So, maybe the answer is getting your AI use aligned with those, not single metrics. But I just want to, get your take on AI playing a role in content creation, or analyzing content performance metrics. I mean, AI's here. How are content marketers going to use it to success?
Well, it's great for repurposing.
Yeah.
It is also a catalyst for visual content and creative output
Mm,
because it can give you more conceptual flavors to choose from at a greater speed than a human would.
mm,
For example, if I'm trying to figure out a visual for a blog article, I will often input a very basic concept as a prompt, such as social media growth. And some of the examples an AI will give me will be things I might have thought of, but it'll also give me things I would have never thought of.
mm.
And it's things like this that I'm talking about.
Right.
And eventually, it'll be AI's video capabilities that'll be the real game changer
Mm.
because smaller companies will soon have capabilities that were once solely reserved for large ones. And that'll really help them compete.
Yeah.
Now, regarding big picture content metric analysis,
Mm,
I'm not that confident in AI yet. And the reason why is because our content data is often incomplete and imperfect.
mm.
And AI has yet to demonstrate to me that it can read a data ink blot and fill in the missing pieces to create a complete picture as well as a skilled human could do it.
Mm.
But there will be certain specific applications where it'll be very useful, and this will probably happen sooner, like performance marketing and certain mid to lower funnel content tactics, for instance.
Mhm.
Like AI will be doing heat mapping, for instance, and this will enable faster feedback and iteration of like product pages, landing pages, things of this nature
Yeah.
faster than humans alone could do. And,
Right.
that could be very useful, especially if sales can actually be made online. It could be tremendously helpful.
Yeah. So you've given us so much to think about. A really great framework for the funnel that's simple to understand, KPIs that we can use, different ways to use tech, mindset shifts, that we can bubble up, ways that we can engage our teams. I mean, it's amazing. But if you had to boil it all down to one piece of advice, and I'm sorry, I'm holding you to the single metric, but what like if somebody's struggling, they're like, oh man, content marketing, what would you just tell them? What's your one piece of advice?
Don't limit me. You're getting 3 pieces.
Oh no.
Okay. All right. First one, at the big picture level, AI is nullifying the mere existence of content as a competitive advantage. Content marketing success will be more about the strategy plus the content and less about just the content itself. You're going to need good strategy and good content. That is what will separate the winners from the losers.
Yes.
The second point, at the level of content itself, a lot of B2B content people are pushing thought leadership, subject matter expertise, and what they call authenticity as ways to stand out from AI. These things are necessary, especially if your brand is not a market leader, but they're not sufficient. Because authenticity and genuine expertise can be hard to distinguish from AI in the 2.5 seconds you have to win a prospect's attention as your LinkedIn post, scrolls by in their feed. With so much content fighting for their attention and more added every day, you need outstanding copy, killer creativity, and genuinely original ideas. You can't win simply offering yet another vertical video with some white guy in a beard, because everybody's doing that now.
I have a beard, Jason.
And the last point regarding metrics, a comprehensive view is a must, because, like I said before, almost any individual metric can be manipulated.
Sure, yeah.
And with some metrics, a very high value, a very high numerical value can actually indicate a problem. For instance, an extremely high engagement rate can indicate that your targeting is too narrow to grow your brand. While a very high number of pages per session on your website can indicate that users are getting lost or that they're struggling to find what they're looking for.
Wow.
And many times, what you want to see in the big picture is progress, slow, steady progress in a large number of metrics, as opposed to only one or a few metrics shooting up fast, which can indicate that they're being gamed or manipulated, and it may actually be hurting you in other areas. And what's more, big growth in certain metrics, like followers, for instance, can actually lead to drops in growth later. For instance, that big expensive paid follower growth push you just did may have merely gathered followers who would have followed you a little later organically. So you're stealing from your future to inflate the present, so to speak. And another area where you can see things like this is SEO. You can publish a bunch of articles at once, and sure, they shoot to the top of Google for a little while, but then they fall because no human is actually reading them, because you've published them at a faster rate than your target audience can read them. So try to aim for steady, comprehensive growth in as many or at least in a large number of content marketing metrics. And a comprehensive view is also useful for another reason. If certain metrics indicate problems, you'll still have a decent idea of your overall content marketing picture. But if you only focus on a few metrics, important things that warrant attention might get missed.
Man, What? So beautiful. And here's just a comeback real fast. You're saying like this person's paying me. I can't give them morals. You want paid followers, all right. You want the numbers to go up and go burr, okay. You want on page one, all right. Is it the responsibility of the content marketer to maybe bubble up a process that finds accountability in its execution? Or, I mean, how just sort of like, do you have a piece of advice for how you can get those higher ups thinking differently? Do you like just sort of like that growth thing is not coming from us, it's coming from the top, it's coming from a pervasive supernatural belief. How do you fight against that? Is it just what you said earlier, or is there something more, or just what do you think about that?
Well, I mean, if I can have some kind of audience with, whoever these people are, I mean, I might, I might bring it up, but if I don't, then all I can really do is educate whoever, the highest level of person that I have direct contact with, and I will if I see something that I think is at least questionable. If I think that they have ridiculous follower growth targets, I will tell I will tell them that this might not necessarily be useful to you for
Long
reasons
run.
X, Y, and Z.
Sure, yeah.
But beyond that, as an outsider, what I can do is limited. Now, if you're an insider, if you're an in-house content marketer, you must be very careful about this, because in a lot of organizations, the content person is very low on the totem pole.
Yeah.
And you will have to respect the chain of command. If you're a content person, many times your superior is the head of digital.
Right.
You can and you can raise them with this person, but if that person says, wow, this is very interesting, you can talk to the head of marketing about it, you have my permission,
Right.
then you can go ahead and do it. But if you can't, it could be very dangerous for your career.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm seeing
making noise about this.
Yeah, there's an existential threat, and it was like, hey, man, don't start banging a drum that you aren't willing to play through the whole song. So I think it's like, well, let me just kind of do what they told me to do, and then hopefully I'll be able to do this. But if you follow Jason's advice on setting things up, connecting it to strategy, really, really drilling in with your team, the importance of it, really making killing content, really original perspectives, things that people would love, and not creating content at a way that people can't eat. I'm just kind of thinking of the Monty Python guy sitting at that table, just like eating and eating and eating. Yeah, hey, if you want to do that, but eventually you're going to pop. And here's how you can do it sustainably, with accountability, with the receipts, thinking about data. This is such a great conversation. People want to connect with you. They want to learn more. How can they do that, Jason?
Well, I mean, LinkedIn is where I spend the most online time. That they can find me through my LinkedIn profile, and it is the most reliable way to engage with me.
Cheese or chocolate?
Are you ready?
Okay.
Cheese or chocolate?
Chocolate.
Okay. Kirk or Picard?
Picard.
Do you want to explain it, or do we have 20 minutes?
For Picard, I mean, he is more cerebral. He thinks more carefully about his decisions.
True.
He wouldn't just punch, a Klingon commander, because he felt like doing it. Kirk did in one episode. I mean, I feel that I feel that Picard is someone who is more admirable.
He's
But
yeah.
Kirk did have one good thing going for him. He was better at talent development. The people who worked for him, all became captains and admirals. I noticed that this seemed to happen by he gave them space. He stayed out. He stayed out of their business.
God.
He let Spock and Scotty do their things. Now Picard. Now he was always sticking his nose into things, and he was kind of a know-it-all. If Geordi and Data were down in engineering, Picard would be there to explaining things, providing advice. He was he was kind of a micromanager that way, and you could see it in his people. A lot of them stayed put. A lot of them didn't really rise up for the ranks. So the one area where Kirk had an advantage was talent development. But I do think that Picard, on the whole, was probably better as a representative of the Federation. If you want to send somebody out for first contact, he's your guy.
Oh my God, I love it. And he's the choice of the next generation. Next question. I got a Pepsi joke in there. Okay. Next question. Rent an apartment on the Death Star or buy a home in Mordor?
Oh my God. Okay, I'm taking Mordor because at least with Mordor cannot be blown up. I mean, if the volcano goes off, you got time to get away. But I think the Death Star is just a little too easy to blow up in one swift shot.
It is, yeah. That is a huge engineering oversight. We're like, what? Do we put the banana in the tailpipe of the Death Star and say no? Oh my God, Luke Skywalker's here. Oh God. Good point. Really good point. And I think the prices are a bit more better in Mordor. So anyway, from what I know, but housing crisis is all over the galaxy. Here's a question. Rolf from the Muppets or Chewbacca?
Chewie. I'm going with Chewie.
It's such a natural choice, but Rolf is there in case you need piano. Here's a question. Robot vacuums, are they beloved or are they to be banished?
Well, I own a robot vacuum.
It's
and
okay.
While it is a superior cleaning instrument, because it has more patience with it,
Right.
than a human does. But I find that I'm always having to move things, get things out of its way.
Right.
So I find that kind of annoying because I'm the one who has to do this job at home, who has to move the furniture and make sure that there's nothing on the floor that it can, get caught up in its wheels. When you have a kid, there's often a lot of junk on the floor.
Yes.
So you got to get that stuff out of the way. It's just, those robot vacuum cleaners, they're kind of divas. I mean, they're very effective, but you also have to put in some work with them, which is, it's got pluses and minuses.
Yeah, totally. Plus, minus. Yeah, it's a binary. It's 1, it's a 0. But good points. Finally, the last question, maybe most contentiously. Is cereal a soup? I'm only asking the hard questions, man.
Cereal is not, I would say no, because cereal is an ingredient that is put into milk. And I tend to think any soup is something that is prepared with all of its ingredients together, if you know what.
Well,
if you know what I mean.
I absolutely do. And I honestly, these last questions, you could create a whole marketing philosophy around these things. You could compare managerial stuff between Kirk and Picard. You could talk about the imminent demise of large scale businesses and building your home on rented or, land or and the tender care that you need when you have something that's going to automate a process. You actually still need to be a human in the loop. I mean, we could do a whole new show off of these, but we don't have time because I think you're right. Cereal is not a soup, right?
I don't even know how you got there or how you came up with it.
Well, then my job is done.
This is a possibility that I had never considered before.
What Gets Measured is a Ninja Cat podcast. Please rate and review the show wherever you find your podcasts. Share this episode on social and visit us on the web at ninjacat.io.